Hi, I'm Dr. Stoop, and I'm talking about the topic conquering fear. I have a book in my office that I give to people who are dealing with the issues of fear, and it's a children's book. And the title of the book is called There's a Nightmare in My Closet. And I let them read it right there in the office because it's a very quick read. It's about a little boy who every night as he goes to bed, he's convinced there are nightmares in his closet. So he closes the closet door, turns out the light, and jumps into bed and pulls the covers over his head. And sure enough, there's peeking out of the closet these monsters that are called nightmares. So one night, the little boy decides to do something different. Instead of jumping into bed and pulling the covers over his head, as soon as he turns out the lights, he gets his little pop gun and sits at the top of his headboard and turns the light back on, and sure enough, there's a nightmare monster at the foot of his bed. And he aims the gun at the guy, at the monster, and the monster starts to cry and says, "Please don't shoot me." And then he says, but he shoots him anyway, and now the monster's really crying because all he did was pop the cork on a pop gun. And uh, and the little boy starts to worry about the monster crying and too loudly. He's going to wake mom and dad. And so finally he puts the nightmare in his bed and covers him up and gets into bed next to him. And he says, "I'm sure there are other nightmares in my closet, but I only have room in my bed for one." So what's the point of it all? Well, it's the whole thing about fear. The little boy is terrified of the monsters in his closet, and he finally decides he's going to do something about it rather than live in fear. And so he gets his little gun and he sits on the top of his bed and he turns the light back on and he shoots the nightmare. The nightmare gets loud and really is a blubbering baby in terms of his response to what the little boy did. And so he tucks him into bed and tries to comfort him, and he conquers what he's afraid of. The only thing that can conquer fear is to face the fear. One of the things that happens when we don't face what we're afraid of is that we become more and more afraid. Fear that is unconfronted grows bigger. I'm sure you've noticed that the things that you fear, if you just try to avoid them, you just try to pretend they're not there, they get bigger and you get more afraid. It's when we stand up and begin to face what we're afraid of and actually deal with it in some way that is constructive that we are able to conquer what we're afraid of. Now, how do I deal with fear that is constructive? Fear is always based on what if. It's an attempt to control the future. It's an attempt to. I mean, the little boy was attempting to control the emergence of the nightmares from his closet by going through a ritual every night when he went to bed. And he finally decided to confront what he was afraid of rather than kind of go along with it and ignore it and pretend it's not there, because it kept getting bigger and bigger. And so he finally decides to face it, and in facing it, he conquers it, because usually what you conquer is the what if, and the what if is the future, and it's an attempt to control the future that is futile and doesn't work. It's kind of a little tale to tell yourself that when you are facing something that you're afraid of, remind yourself that, like the nightmare in the closet, if I stand up and face what I'm afraid of, the fear will become a blubbering little baby and will be totally ineffective in terms of frightening me. That's the joy of facing the what if. And I hope I've done justice to the story. It's a great story and great illustrations and fun to read. If this has stirred up any kind of a need to talk to someone, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE, and somebody will be there to talk to you about whatever it is you need to talk about.